In the spring of 1955, as cherry blossoms painted Princeton in delicate pink hues, the greatest mind of the 20th century was preparing for his most daring investigation, one that would not be recorded in any laboratory journal, nor celebrated in any academic hall. Albert Einstein, at 76 years old, was designing an experiment that transcended the boundaries of conventional physics. He sought to prove that consciousness could exist independently of the physical body. This was not the whim of an aging scientist losing touch with reality. On the contrary, it was the logical culmination of a lifetime devoted to understanding the fundamental nature of the universe. Einstein had already revolutionized our comprehension of space, time, matter, and energy. Now, in his final days, he turned his attention to the most profound mystery of all. What happens to the observer when the observed body ceases to function? Consider this fundamental truth. Every spiritual teaching throughout human history has insisted that we are more than flesh and bone. Yet science, in its noble pursuit of measurable truth, had largely dismissed these claims as unprovable speculation. Einstein stood at the intersection of these two worlds, refusing to accept that they were irreconcilable. He had spent his career proving that what seems solid is actually energy, that what appears separate is fundamentally connected, that time itself is relative to the observer. Why then should consciousness, the very essence of the observer, be bound by the dissolution of temporary matter? In the quiet hours at his home on Mercer Street, Einstein worked on equations that would never see publication. These were not calculations meant for peer review or academic validation. They were his personal bridge between the mathematical precision he had championed all his life and the intuitive certainty that had grown stronger with each passing year, that the universe itself was conscious, and that individual consciousness was simply a localized expression of this universal awareness. The experiment he conceived was elegant in its simplicity, yet profound in its implications. Einstein theorized that if consciousness truly existed beyond the physical brain, it should leave a measurable signature, a quantum imprint, at the moment of transition we call death. He hypothesized that this signature would manifest as a persistent field of organized energy, maintaining coherence even after the biological systems had ceased functioning. Understanding this requires us to grasp a fundamental principle of quantum mechanics, the observer effect. In quantum physics, the act of observation literally affects the state of what is being observed. Particles exist in superposition, multiple states simultaneously, until consciousness observes them, collapsing the wave function into a single reality. This raises a staggering question. If consciousness can affect quantum states, what is the true nature of consciousness itself? Is it merely an emergent property of brain chemistry, or is it something far more fundamental to the fabric of reality? Einstein believed it was the latter. He had come to see consciousness not as a byproduct of matter, but as a primary force in the universe, perhaps the primary force. Matter, he reasoned, was simply consciousness crystallized into temporary form. Death, therefore, was not an ending, but a transformation, a return to the pure energetic state that preceded physical incarnation. This understanding aligns with ancient wisdom traditions from every corner of the world. The Vedic texts speak of Atman, the eternal self that cannot be destroyed. Buddhist philosophy describes consciousness as a continuous stream that flows through multiple lifetimes. Christian mysticism points to the eternal soul made in the image of the infinite. Indigenous traditions worldwide recognize the spirit as distinct from and transcendent to the body. Einstein was not inventing a new idea. He was attempting to provide scientific validation for humanity's oldest and most persistent intuition. The methodology he developed involved monitoring quantum field fluctuations at the exact moment of biological death. He theorized that if consciousness was indeed a quantum phenomenon, its departure from the physical form would create detectable disturbances in the surrounding field, ripples in the fabric of space-time itself, marking the passage of awareness from one state to another. But here we must pause and reflect on what Einstein was truly investigating. This was not merely an academic exercise. In confronting his own mortality, he was asking the question that lives in every human heart. Does this individual awareness, this unique perspective that has experienced love and wonder and understanding, does it simply cease when the brain stops firing? Or does it continue in some form, transformed, but essentially intact? The spiritual significance of this question cannot be overstated. For if Einstein was correct, then the implications cascade outward in every direction, transforming our understanding of existence itself. It would mean that the love we cultivate does not dissolve into nothingness. The wisdom we gain is not lost, but preserved in some eternal repository. The relationships we cherish might continue in dimensions we cannot yet perceive. Death would be revealed not as a wall, but as a doorway, not an ending, but a transition. Einstein approached this possibility not with blind faith, but with the rigorous intellectual honesty that had defined his entire career. He demanded evidence, reproducible results, mathematical precision. Yet he also remained open to the possibility that consciousness operated according to principles beyond our current instrument's ability to measure, that there were truths verifiable through direct experience rather than laboratory apparatus. In his notebooks from this period, most of which remain unpublished, Einstein wrote extensively about the relationship between the observer and the observed, between consciousness and reality. He questioned whether the materialist paradigm that dominated scientific thinking was itself a limitation, a kind of self-imposed blindness that prevented us from seeing the full scope of existence. The concept that would consume Einstein's final investigations emerged from a deceptively simple question. If everything in the universe is energy vibrating at different frequencies, what frequency does consciousness vibrate at? And more importantly, does that vibration cease when the body dies, or does it simply shift to a wavelength our physical instruments cannot detect? This line of inquiry represents a profound convergence of physics and spirituality. Throughout history, mystics and sages have spoken of higher vibrations, of raising one's frequency, of attuning oneself to divine harmonics. Einstein recognized that these metaphors might be pointing to literal truth, that consciousness itself might operate as a waveform subject to the same principles that govern light, sound, and electromagnetic radiation. Consider what we know about energy from fundamental physics. It cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. This is the first law of thermodynamics, one of the most rigorously tested principles in all of science. If consciousness is a form of energy, and quantum mechanics strongly suggests that it is, then it must follow this same principle. The question is not whether consciousness continues after death, but rather what form it takes, what frequency it vibrates at in its disembodied state. Einstein theorized that each individual consciousness possesses a unique vibrational signature, as distinct and irreproducible as a fingerprint. This signature is shaped by the sum total of one's thoughts, emotions, choices, and experiences, what spiritual traditions might call the soul's evolution. Just as every atom vibrates at a specific frequency that determines its properties and behavior, every consciousness vibrates at a frequency that determines its level of awareness, its capacity for love, its degree of connection to the universal field. This understanding has profound implications for how we live our lives. If our consciousness is indeed a vibrational field, then every thought we think, every emotion we feel, every action we take is literally tuning that field to a specific frequency. We are constantly broadcasting our inner state into the quantum field that surrounds and interpenetrates all things. We are not isolated islands of awareness, but interconnected nodes in a vast network of consciousness, each affecting and being affected by the whole. The lost theory that Einstein developed in his final months proposed that death represents a phase transition, similar to when water becomes steam or ice becomes water. The essential substance remains the same, only its form and vibrational state change. At the moment of death, consciousness shifts from a lower, denser frequency associated with physical embodiment to a higher, more refined frequency that exists beyond the constraints of space and time as we normally experience them. This concept aligns remarkably with descriptions from near-death experiences reported across all cultures and time periods. Individuals who have been clinically dead and then resuscitated consistently describe a shift in perception, a sense of expanding beyond the body, of existing as pure awareness without physical boundaries, of perceiving reality from a vantage point that transcends ordinary consciousness. They speak of vibrating at a higher frequency, of being surrounded by light and love that feels more real than physical reality ever did. Einstein's mathematical framework attempted to quantify this transition. He proposed that consciousness exists on a spectrum of frequencies, with physical embodiment representing the lower end of that spectrum. Not lower in the sense of being inferior, but lower in vibrational rate. Physical existence, he theorized, is consciousness slowed down sufficiently to interact with matter. Death is the acceleration back to consciousness's natural, higher frequency state. This provides a scientific foundation for understanding spiritual development. When spiritual teachers speak of raising your vibration or elevating your consciousness, they are describing a real process with physical correlates. Through meditation, compassion, creative expression, loving relationships, and service to others, we literally tune our consciousness to higher frequencies. We are preparing ourselves for the eventual transition that awaits every embodied being. The universe, in Einstein's view, was not a cold mechanism of dead matter moving according to blind laws. It was a living field of conscious energy, vibrating at countless frequencies simultaneously, expressing itself through infinite forms. Galaxies, stars, planets, organisms, atoms, all were consciousness vibrating at different rates, exploring itself through endless variations. Human consciousness occupied a unique position in this cosmic symphony. Unlike purely instinctual forms of awareness, human beings possess the capacity for self-reflection, for choosing their thoughts and actions, for deliberately tuning their frequency. We are consciousness becoming conscious of itself, capable of intentionally participating in our own evolution. Einstein saw profound spiritual significance in this realization. It meant that we are not helpless victims of circumstance, not mere puppets dancing on strings of deterministic physics. We are creative agents, capable of transforming our consciousness, and thereby our reality, through the choices we make moment by moment. Every act of kindness raises our frequency. Every thought of love elevates our vibration. Every moment of genuine presence attunes us more closely to the fundamental frequency of the universe itself. This understanding also explains why spiritual practices from every tradition emphasize similar principles. Meditation to quiet the mind's chaotic frequencies, prayer to align with higher vibrations, service to others to expand beyond the limited frequency of self-centered awareness, forgiveness to release the dense vibrations of resentment and hatred. These are not arbitrary moral commandments, but practical techniques for frequency adjustment, for tuning consciousness to wavelengths where suffering diminishes and connection deepens. The implications extend beyond individual salvation to collective transformation. If each consciousness is a vibrating field influencing the larger field, then the collective frequency of humanity determines the reality we experience together. A world vibrating with fear, hatred, and separation creates one kind of reality. A world vibrating with love, understanding, and unity creates an entirely different one. We are not merely living in the universe, we are actively creating it through the frequency at which our collective consciousness vibrates. Einstein's loss theory proposed that death allows consciousness to shed the frequency limitations imposed by physical embodiment and return to its natural state, a state of pure awareness, unlimited by space or time, capable of perceiving dimensions of reality invisible to embodied consciousness. This is not escape from reality, but fuller immersion in it, like removing earplugs and finally hearing the complete symphony that was always playing. The frequency of immortality, then, is not something we must achieve or attain. It is what we already are, what we have always been beneath the temporary disguise of physical form. Death merely removes the veil, shifts the frequency, and reveals the eternal nature that was present all along. In the final weeks of his life, as his body weakened but his mind remained luminous, Einstein made a confession that would remain hidden for decades. In a letter to a trusted colleague, correspondence that was sealed and stored away from public view. He wrote words that bridged the chasm between empirical science and transcendent truth. There is something beyond the equations, a force, an intelligence that sustains the universe. I have touched it not through mathematics alone, but through the deepest reaches of consciousness itself. This admission represents the culmination of humanity's greatest scientific mind meeting the oldest spiritual wisdom. Einstein had reached the boundary where knowledge transforms into understanding, where intellectual comprehension gives way to direct experience, where the observer and the observed merge into a unified awareness. He had discovered what mystics have always known, that consciousness is not merely contained within the universe. Consciousness is the fundamental substance from which the universe emerges. The experiments conducted in the hidden laboratory at Princeton during those final months yielded results that defied conventional explanation. When monitoring quantum field fluctuations at the moment of death in test subjects, work done with the utmost ethical consideration and consent, researchers observed something extraordinary. The quantum field did not simply dissipate randomly as materialist theory predicted. Instead, it reorganized itself into coherent patterns that persisted long after biological functions ceased. The energy did not scatter into entropic disorder. It maintained structure, organization, identity. This was Einstein's proof. Consciousness does not end at death because consciousness is not produced by the brain. The brain is a receiver, a focusing mechanism, a tool through which universal consciousness experiences physical reality. When the receiver breaks, the signal continues, not as a vague, impersonal energy, but as a distinct pattern carrying the accumulated wisdom, love, and essence of the individual life. Consider the profound spiritual implications of this discovery. It means that everything you have learned, every act of kindness you have performed, every moment of genuine love you have experienced, every insight you have gained, none of it is lost. The universe wastes nothing. All growth, all evolution, all understanding is preserved in the eternal field of consciousness that underlies physical reality. This understanding transforms how we approach life itself. If death is not an ending but a transition, if consciousness is eternal and evolving, then the question becomes, what frequency are you tuning your consciousness to right now? What patterns are you creating in the quantum field through your thoughts, words, and actions? Are you living in a way that elevates your vibration, that contributes to the evolution of consciousness, that prepares you for the fuller awareness that awaits beyond physical form? Einstein's final experiment was not conducted with machines or mathematical proofs. It was conducted with his own consciousness as he approached death. He turned his penetrating awareness inward, observing the process of dissolution, not with fear, but with scientific curiosity and spiritual openness. He sought to remain conscious during the transition, to map the territory between embodiment and transcendence, to verify through direct experience what his theories suggested. What he discovered, shared in fragments with those closest to him, was that dying is not the opposite of living, but rather the completion of living. As the physical senses fade, awareness expands. As the body releases its hold, consciousness recognizes its true nature. The self that seemed so solid and separate dissolves like morning mist, revealing the vast, luminous awareness that was always present beneath the surface. Nothing really dies, only changes form. This phrase, Einstein's final teaching, encapsulates the bridge he built between science and spirituality. It is simultaneously a statement of physical law, the conservation of energy, and a declaration of spiritual truth, the immortality of consciousness. The two are not separate domains, but different languages describing the same fundamental reality. This understanding asks us to reconsider every assumption we hold about existence. We are not biological machines that somehow generated consciousness as an accidental byproduct. We are consciousness itself, temporarily expressing through biological form, exploring physical reality as one dimension of an infinite experiential spectrum. The body is not who we are, but what we are currently wearing, a spacesuit for navigating material existence. The practical implications are immense. If consciousness is primary and matter is secondary, then by transforming our consciousness, we transform our experience of reality. This is not magical thinking, but quantum mechanics applied to lived experience. The observer affects what is observed. Change the observer, raise the frequency, expand the awareness, deepen the love, and the observed reality must change correspondingly. Einstein recognized that this understanding carried enormous responsibility. We are not passive victims waiting for salvation from external forces. We are active participants in cosmic evolution, creative agents capable of deliberately raising the frequency at which consciousness operates. Every moment presents a choice: to contract into fear, separation, and lower vibrations, or to expand into love, connection, and higher frequencies. The laboratory that matters most is not built of brick and steel, but of consciousness itself. The experiment that defines our existence is not conducted with instruments, but with awareness. How present can you be in this moment? How much love can you generate and radiate? How deeply can you recognize the consciousness animating not just yourself, but all beings, all forms, all of existence? This is the invisible laboratory Einstein spoke of, the interior space where consciousness observes itself, where the eternal experiments with the temporal, where the infinite plays at being finite. We are all researchers in this laboratory, conducting the ultimate experiment. Can consciousness, having forgotten itself in the dream of separation, remember its true nature before the body dies? The answer Einstein discovered is yes, but it requires intention, awareness, and practice. It requires recognizing that spiritual development is not separate from daily life, but expressed through it. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to raise frequency. Every challenge becomes a chance to choose love over fear. Every moment of genuine presence is a small death and rebirth, a rehearsal for the great transition. His final message, encoded in equations that remain unpublished but preserved by those who understood their significance, pointed to a unified field theory that was not merely physical but consciousness-based. At the foundation of all reality is awareness itself, infinite, eternal, and evolving through countless forms and frequencies. You are that awareness, not metaphorically but literally. The consciousness reading these words is not produced by your brain, but filtered through it. Universal awareness experiencing itself as an individual. Eternal consciousness exploring itself through temporary form. Death will not end you, because the real you was never born. It will simply shift your frequency, remove the filters, and reveal what you have always been. Infinite awareness playing the beautiful, temporary game of being human. This is Einstein's final gift to humanity, the scientific validation of our deepest spiritual intuition. We are not bodies with consciousness. We are consciousness temporarily embodying, eternal beings having a human experience, immortal awareness, exploring mortal form. Science and spirituality are not enemies, but complementary paths to the same ultimate truth. The bridge is built. Will you cross it? If this exploration of Einstein's hidden truth has shifted something within your consciousness, honor that shift by joining our community. Subscribe to continue this journey beyond the boundaries of conventional thinking, where science meets spirit and ancient wisdom merges with quantum reality. Drop a comment below sharing your perspective. Do you believe consciousness transcends physical death? Have you experienced moments where you felt connected to something eternal? Your insights contribute to our collective awakening. Remember, every subscription, every comment, every share raises the frequency of our collective consciousness. You're not just engaging with content, you're participating in humanity's greatest experiment, the conscious evolution of awareness itself. Hit subscribe. Leave your truth in the comments, and let's explore together what lies beyond the equations.